10 Stoic habits you should practice every day to feel in control of your life. Not control over people, not control over outcomes, control over yourself. Look carefully at your day. You wake up and before your feet touch the floor, your mind is already running through problems. You reach for your phone and your attention is no longer yours. One message shifts your mood. One comment alters your confidence. One unexpected delay steals your composure. Nothing catastrophic happened. Yet internally, you were moved. You are not out of control externally. You are emotionally outsourced internally. Control did not disappear in a dramatic collapse. It eroded in small concessions. In allowing the first thought of the day to be worry. In letting uncertainty about tomorrow dictate how you feel today. In giving other people's behavior authority over your peace. In negotiating your discipline based on mood. What if control was never about dominating the world, but about governing your response to it? What if the difference between chaos and steadiness is not circumstance, but daily orientation? The Stoics understood something uncomfortable and liberating at the same time. You cannot command events. You cannot guarantee outcomes. You cannot secure the behavior of others. But you can govern your interpretation, your effort, your posture, your habits of attention. And that governance is not achieved once, it is practiced daily. These are not productivity tricks. They are cognitive recalibrations. Habits that reshape how you meet the morning, how you interpret friction, how you respond to provocation, how you detach from results, how you examine yourself at night. If you practice them, you will not control everything. You will control the only thing that was ever yours. It begins the moment you wake up, before the world speaks, before notifications invade, before circumstances make their demands. The first battle is quiet, and most people lose it without noticing. Morning cognitive framing before external input. The first thought of your day is rarely intentional. It is reactive. You wake up and immediately remember unfinished tasks, unresolved conversations, upcoming pressures. Before you stand, you are already behind. Before you breathe consciously, your mind has surrendered to circumstance. That first unexamined thought sets the interpretive bias for everything that follows. If your morning begins with urgency, the day feels like a race. If it begins with worry, the day feels unstable. If it begins with comparison, the day feels insufficient. The mind, in its first minutes of wakefulness, establishes tone, and tone influences perception. Most people allow the world to speak before they do. They check messages, they scroll through news, they absorb other people's priorities. Attention is handed over before it is even claimed. The Stoic habit is different. Before you allow external input, you choose internal posture, not empty positivity, not denial of difficulty, deliberate orientation. You remind yourself of 3 facts. Today will contain friction. Not everything will go as planned. You will encounter imperfect people. And none of that is personal. This is not pessimism. It is stabilization. When you expect smoothness, the first obstacle feels like disruption. When you expect friction, the first obstacle feels normal. That shift alone prevents emotional overreaction. Then you anchor your mind in what is yours. Your effort, your conduct, your interpretation, your response. You cannot control how the day unfolds. You can control how you meet it. This short framing requires minutes, not hours. But its impact is structural. It prevents the mind from being shaped by randomness. It prevents reactivity from becoming default mode. When you choose your mental posture before the world speaks, you enter the day with authority instead of vulnerability. And once you establish that authority in the morning, the next habit strengthens it further. Because expecting friction in general is one thing. Preparing specifically for it is another. Daily premeditation of friction. Most people are not destabilized by difficulty itself. They are destabilized by surprise. They expected cooperation and encountered resistance. They expected efficiency and met delay. They expected understanding and received indifference. The event is manageable. The shock is not. The Stoic does something counterintuitive at the beginning of the day. He anticipates friction deliberately. Before the world presents obstacles, he imagines them calmly. A difficult conversation, a misunderstanding, a setback. an unexpected change of plan. Not to dwell on disaster, not to generate fear, but to remove the illusion that the day owes him smoothness. This habit creates psychological immunity. When you assume the day will unfold exactly as you prefer, every disruption feels personal. It feels unfair. It feels like an attack on your plans. But when you remind yourself that obstacles are part of the structure of reality, not violations of it, emotional intensity decreases. This practice is not negativity, it is preparation. Imagine telling yourself each morning, I will encounter impatience, I will encounter incompetence, I will encounter delay, I will encounter uncertainty, and when I do, I will respond with composure. Now, when impatience appears, it is not shocking. When delay occurs, it is not destabilizing. You anticipated it. You prepared your mind for it. Your nervous system does not spike as sharply because the event aligns with expectation. This single shift reduces anger dramatically. It reduces frustration. It reduces the sense that the world is conspiring against you. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You recognize, this is part of the terrain. And when you see life as terrain, rather than as an obstacle to your preference, you move differently. You adapt instead of resist. But even when you expect friction, something else still threatens control. The stories your mind builds in real time when events unfold. Separate event from narrative in real time. Most of your emotional turbulence does not come from events. It comes from the story you attach to them. An email arrives without warmth. The event is neutral. The narrative becomes disrespect. A project is delayed. The event is logistical. The narrative becomes failure. Someone disagrees with you. The event is difference. The narrative becomes rejection. The escalation happens fast. So fast that you rarely notice the addition. This habit requires speed. Catch the exaggeration while it is forming. When something happens, describe it in the most factual language possible. Strip it of interpretation. Remove adjectives. Remove intention. Remove prediction. Instead of, they are ignoring me, say, they have not responded yet. Instead of, this is a disaster, say, the plan changed. Instead of, they embarrassed me, say, they disagreed publicly. Notice how the emotional intensity drops when the narrative shrinks. You are not denying reality. You are refusing to inflate it. The Stoics understood that disturbance is born from judgment. The event itself carries no emotional charge until meaning is attached. By separating fact from interpretation immediately, you prevent momentum. Most people wait until they are overwhelmed to reflect. This habit acts earlier. It interrupts exaggeration before it becomes belief. And when exaggeration loses power, you remain grounded. This practice does not eliminate discomfort. It keeps discomfort proportional. Proportion is control. But there is another layer that destabilizes even disciplined minds. Not just how you interpret events, but how tightly you cling to their outcomes. Practice outcome. Detachment while executing. Most people attempt detachment after failure. They tell themselves to accept the result once it is already painful. But by then, anxiety has built momentum. Attachment has already tightened. The emotional cost has already been paid. The Stoic practice begins earlier. Detach while you are still acting. As you work, as you speak, as you prepare, remind yourself, my responsibility is the quality of my effort, not the guarantee of the result. The result belongs to variables beyond my command. My conduct belongs to me. This mental posture changes the emotional texture of performance. When you attach to outcome during execution, your mind splits. Part of you is present. Part of you is projecting forward, calculating what will happen if this succeeds or fails. Anxiety grows in that split, but when you anchor fully in the process, attention stabilizes. You focus on precision, clarity, effort. The future becomes secondary. This does not make you indifferent. It makes you steady. You still want success. You still pursue excellence. But your identity is not at stake in the outcome. Your self-respect rests in your effort. This reduces fear dramatically, because fear is often the anticipation of losing something you believe defines you. When the outcome no longer defines you, fear weakens. Detachment mid-task is discipline in motion. It prevents emotional volatility before it begins. Limit mental time travel. Your body exists in the present. Your mind rarely does. It revisits past conversations, replaying what should have been said. It imagines future failures, rehearsing what might go wrong. It constructs alternate realities and then reacts to them as if they are happening now. The result is emotional instability disconnected from current reality. Control weakens when your attention lives outside the present. The past cannot be altered. The future cannot be secured. Yet most anxiety is generated by revisiting what is fixed or pre-experiencing what is uncertain. This habit is not about forced mindfulness. It is about strategic attention. When you catch yourself mentally time traveling, pause and ask one question: what can I influence right now? If the answer is nothing, release the thought. If the answer is something small, act on it immediately. Present capability is always smaller than imagined scenarios, but it is real. The Stoics anchored themselves in the present because it is the only domain where action is possible. Regret is often an attempt to rewrite what has already occurred. Anxiety is often an attempt to guarantee what has not yet happened. Both are forms of illusion. When you return attention to the present task, the present conversation, the present responsibility, you regain ground. Emotional intensity decreases because imagination loses dominance. This does not mean you ignore lessons from the past or preparation for the future. It means you engage them deliberately rather than compulsively. The present is where discipline is practiced. The present is where interpretation is chosen. The present is where effort is applied. And when you repeatedly return here, control becomes tangible. But awareness alone is not enough. To stabilize authority, you need structure. One anchor that reinforces self-command every single day. One non-negotiable daily discipline. Control is not built through intensity, it is built through consistency. Most people create long lists of improvements. They attempt to optimize everything at once. When energy drops, the structure collapses. And when the structure collapses, self-trust weakens. Instead of complexity, choose one non-negotiable daily discipline. Not 5, not 10. 1. It may be physical training. It may be focused study. It may be writing. It may be deliberate silence for a fixed period. The content matters less than the constancy. What matters is that it is executed regardless of mood. This habit is not about productivity. It is about identity reinforcement. Every day you complete this anchor behavior, you send a message to yourself. My actions are not governed by impulse. They are governed by decision. That message accumulates power. When motivation is high, the habit is easy. When motivation is low, the habit is formative. Because on low energy days, execution becomes proof of discipline rather than proof of enthusiasm. This single non-negotiable stabilizes your sense of control. It creates a fixed point in a variable day. No matter how chaotic circumstances become, one part of your conduct remains stable. The Stoics valued repetition because repetition strengthens character. Not repetition for external recognition, but repetition for internal alignment. When you complete your anchor habit daily, your confidence stops depending on outcomes. It begins depending on evidence. Evidence that you can act independent of mood. And as this identity strengthens, you become more aware of moments when you drift. When impulse begins to govern you without notice. That awareness requires interruption. A deliberate pause in the middle of your day. Midday emotional audit. Control rarely disappears in a dramatic moment. It erodes gradually. One irritation goes unchecked. One assumption is believed too quickly. One distraction steals more time than intended. By midday, your internal posture has shifted without you noticing. This habit interrupts drift. At a fixed point in your day, pause deliberately. Not for long. A few minutes are enough. Ask yourself one precise question. Who is governing me right now? Impulse or reason? Examine your current state without judgment. Are you tense because of something minor? Are you rushing without necessity? Are you replaying a conversation that has already ended? Are you reacting to imagined futures instead of handling present tasks? This audit is not self-criticism. It is recalibration. When you bring awareness to your emotional state in the middle of the day, you prevent escalation. You catch exaggeration early. You notice when your tone has hardened. You recognize when attachment to outcome is tightening. The Stoics practiced constant self-observation. Not obsessively, but deliberately. They understood that awareness precedes mastery. If you do not examine your inner condition, it governs you silently. This pause reasserts authority. You remind yourself of what is within your control. Your response, your effort, your interpretation. You release what is outside it. Other people's reactions, uncertain results, hypothetical problems. Often a simple adjustment in posture changes the remainder of the day. Without this habit, you may finish the day exhausted without understanding why. With it, you maintain direction. But awareness and recalibration are not sufficient on their own. Strength requires training, and training requires deliberate exposure to controlled discomfort. Controlled exposure to discomfort. Most of your emotional reactivity comes from avoiding discomfort. You avoid silence because it feels restless. You avoid waiting because it feels inefficient. You avoid difficulty because it feels inconvenient. The more you avoid discomfort, the more power it gains over you. Control weakens when comfort becomes a requirement. The Stoics trained themselves to endure small voluntary hardships, not to suffer for the sake of suffering, but to remove fear of it. They exposed themselves deliberately to cold, hunger, simplicity, and restraint. Not dramatically, intentionally. You can practice this in modern terms. Choose small discomforts daily. Take a cold shower for a brief period. Sit in silence without stimulation. Delay gratification when impulse demands immediacy. Finish a task before checking your phone. Speak calmly when irritation urges sharpness. These are controlled environments where you practice emotional neutrality. When you voluntarily face discomfort, you teach your nervous system that difficulty is not danger. You reduce the shock response. You build tolerance. This habit strengthens composure under pressure. If you can remain steady under small voluntary discomfort, you are more stable under unexpected friction. The mind becomes less reactive. The body becomes less alarmed. The gap between stimulus and response widens. Controlled exposure also dismantles dependency on ideal conditions. You no longer need everything to be smooth in order to function effectively. You learn to act despite inconvenience. This builds resilience. And resilience reinforces authority. But strength without reflection can turn into rigidity. To maintain balance, you must review your day with honesty and precision, without condemning yourself for imperfection. Evening review without self-condemnation. Control is not reinforced by ignoring mistakes. It is reinforced by examining them calmly. At the end of the day, most people distract themselves into sleep. They avoid reflection because it feels uncomfortable. But without review, patterns remain invisible. Reactions repeat. Habits persist unchecked. The Stoic habit is different. Before the day closes, you pause and ask yourself 3 clear questions. Where did I exaggerate today? Where did I react instead of respond? Where did I maintain composure? This is not a moral trial. It is a strategic recalibration. If you condemn yourself harshly, you weaken discipline. Shame does not build stability. But if you observe your behavior with precision, you strengthen awareness. Perhaps you allowed a minor inconvenience to control your mood. Perhaps you clung to an outcome too tightly. Perhaps you handled a difficult conversation with calm restraint. Acknowledge both. When you recognize errors without dramatizing them, you reduce their power. You adjust intention for tomorrow. When you recognize composure, you reinforce identity. You see evidence of growth. This review creates continuity between days. You are not starting from zero each morning. You are refining. And refinement is the path to mastery. Without review, control feels random. With review, it becomes progressive. As this habit deepens, something changes subtly. You no longer measure your day by outcomes alone. You measure it by alignment with principle. Reduce unnecessary opinions. One of the most overlooked drains on inner control is the habit of forming opinions about everything. Every headline, every social post, every decision someone else makes, every behavior. that does not align with your preference. The mind reacts instantly, evaluates, criticizes, compares. And with each reaction, your emotional state shifts. You believe you are simply thinking. In reality, you are surrendering energy. The Stoics understood that not every impression requires engagement. Not every event deserves judgment. Not every external movement calls for internal commentary. When you form opinions impulsively, you bind yourself to circumstances that were never yours to carry. Notice how quickly you react to information. Someone disagrees with you and irritation forms. A stranger succeeds and comparison appears. News breaks and anxiety rises. None of these events directly alter your life in that moment, yet your internal balance shifts. Why? Because you granted them authority through opinion. This habit invites restraint. Not silence in speech alone, but silence in mental reaction. When something happens that does not demand your direct action, practice non-attachment. Ask yourself, does this require my judgment? Does this require my emotional investment? Is this within my sphere of influence? Often, the answer is no. When you refrain from unnecessary opinions, you conserve psychological energy. Your mind becomes less reactive, less scattered. You begin to notice how much agitation was self-generated through commentary that served no purpose. This does not mean indifference to injustice or ignorance of the world. It means precision in engagement. You choose when to invest thought and when to release it. You reserve emotional intensity for what truly concerns your conduct and responsibility. There is discipline in restraint. Every unnecessary opinion strengthens attachment. Attachment strengthens emotional volatility. Volatility weakens control. When you limit commentary, you strengthen neutrality. When you strengthen neutrality, you expand clarity. And clarity reinforces authority. Consider how much of your daily disturbance comes from reacting to things you cannot change. Other people's views, events outside your reach, situations that will unfold regardless of your frustration. By reducing the impulse to judge immediately, you reclaim ground. This habit also sharpens perception. When you stop filling silence with commentary, you observe more accurately. You see facts instead of projections. You listen without preparing rebuttals. You engage without emotional inflation. The Stoic does not attempt to control the noise of the world. He controls his response to it. And one of the most powerful responses is deliberate restraint. Over time, this practice builds internal spaciousness. Your mind is no longer crowded with reactions. It becomes deliberate, measured, selective. Control is not strengthened by reacting to everything. It is strengthened by choosing what deserves reaction. And when you choose wisely, your inner world becomes less chaotic, less reactive, more stable. That stability is not dramatic. It is quiet. It does not demand attention. It does not seek validation. It simply endures. Daily recommitment to the dichotomy of control. Control fades when it becomes an idea instead of a practice. You may understand the Stoic principle intellectually. Some things are within your control, others are not. But unless this distinction is consciously revisited every day, it dissolves under pressure. Emotion blurs it. Attachment distorts it. Impulse overrides it. This habit is simple but decisive. At the beginning or end of each day, deliberately reaffirm what is yours and what is not. My effort is mine. My interpretation is mine. My response is mine. Other people's reactions are not mine. The timing of outcomes is not mine. The unfolding of events is not mine. This is not resignation. It is orientation. When you fail to make this distinction daily, you unconsciously attempt to control everything. You worry about opinions. You fear uncertain futures. You resent delays. And slowly, your sense of control erodes. But when you recommit to the dichotomy consciously, emotional clarity returns. You stop wasting energy on territory that never belonged to you. You invest fully in the ground you actually command. This shift feels subtle, yet profound. Instead of asking, how can I guarantee this outcome, you ask, how can I execute my responsibility well? Instead of fearing uncertainty, you prepare for it. Instead of resenting imperfection, you expect it. Over time, This daily recommitment restructures your inner posture. You no longer wake up hoping the world behaves. You wake up prepared to behave well regardless of the world. Control is an inner posture. You searched for control in outcomes, in plans, in certainty, in the cooperation of others. And each time the world shifted, your stability shifted with it. It felt as though control was fragile, temporary, dependent on favorable conditions. But control was never out there. It was in the way you wake up and choose your first thought, in the way you expect friction instead of demanding smoothness, in the way you separate fact from narrative, in the way you detach from results while giving full effort, in the way you return your mind to the present instead of wandering through regret and speculation. It was in your daily anchor of discipline, in your willingness to audit yourself honestly, in your exposure to discomfort without complaint, in your restraint of speech, in your protection of attention, in your reduction of unnecessary opinion, in your commitment to simplicity. Control is not loud. It does not announce itself. It does not need applause. It is visible in how you respond when things do not go your way, in how steady your voice remains under pressure, in how quickly you recover from disappointment, in how calmly you meet uncertainty. Nothing outside may have changed. People remain unpredictable. Outcomes remain uncertain. The future remains unguaranteed. But you are no longer easily moved. You do not chase certainty. You cultivate composure. You do not demand perfection. You practice alignment. You do not attempt to control everything. You govern what is yours, and what is yours is enough. Control is not domination of events. It is discipline of perception. It is mastery of response. It is the quiet confidence that no matter what arrives, you can meet it without surrendering yourself. When this posture becomes daily practice, you stop asking for control